Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, come on, go to grab yourself a front row seat before the gone, they're going fast. You don't want to miss this. It's time for another exciting installment of the Clyde Always Show. With me, your always clever, always handsome, always charming host, Clyde Always. And I ain't no common carnival barker, I am the bard of the lower haze. And this is the tale of Devin and the vegan cappuccino. Once upon a time, in the hippest, most happening city there ever was, there lived a handsome and sinister devil named Devin. Devin had fiery crimson skin, and he had 2 gigantic devil horns, and he had a forked tail, and he wore his hair in a gloriously disheveled floppy man bun, which he never took down, as it would give him advice from time to time. Now, Devin worked in this pretentious coffee house that was built out of reclaimed popsicle sticks and primitive light bulbs, and rumor had it that he himself had forged those wrought iron fixtures way down in the fires of hell. Clink! But one day, while Devin was obnoxiously banging that metal milk pitcher thing over and over again, he was swirling the froth and peering into it discerningly. There came, waltzing through the door of the cafe, the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. And she was in skin-tight spandex yoga pants and a tank top revealing 2 full sleeves of the cutest fucking new school tattoos he'd ever seen. She skipped all merrily up to the counter and she batted her eyelashes at him in bed with the slightest of wine. She said, "Have you got any almond milk?" So Devin paused his tapping and swirling a moment to listen to what his top bun had to say, and it whispered eerily into his ear and said, "Yeah, go ahead, take her. She's asking for it." So Devin the devil, he put on his most charming of smiles and he replied with a matter of fact, he said, "Yeah, sure thing, little mama, but that's gonna cost you a little extra." And the girl pathetically went, but how much? And Devin barked back, "Nothing really, sweetheart, just your eternal soul." When suddenly from the depths of the milk pitcher came the sickening sounds of the screams of the damned. Ah! As rising above the swim was a tremendous cloud of the blackest of bats. Witches and skeletons and scarecrows and gnats, not to mention animated instruments of torture and a whole parade of evil circus clowns. The poor girl screamed as the entire cafe around her, oh, it morphed and melted into a sizzling lake of fire, and she found herself stranded on an island with nowhere to run, while leering right into her face was Devin the Devil and his devious bun. He seized her by the shoulders and he growled through clenched and razor-sharp teeth. He said, "Surrender your soul, sweetheart, and the vegan cappuccino will be yours." But the girl stood tall and silent, goddammit, and she glared back defiantly. And breaking free from his grasp, she turned her back on the devil, revealing 2 perfectly symmetrical and fucking adorable angel wings tattooed on her shoulder blades. Ah! And from the ink sprayed forth the brightest of white lights and a hail of feathers and heaven song, and the top one hissed like a pile of snakes as Devin tried desperately to shield his eyes. No, and the girl took flight. Boom. Transforming all the hideous horrors of the underworld into little puppies and little kitties and newborn lambs. And she replaced that lake of lava with a puddle of strawberry non-dairy frozen dessert. That's right. And he thrashed in it as the angel descended out on top of it and withdrew from her purse a pair of sparkling scissors. Dun, dun, dun. And she just cut that bun off the top of his head, and she cast it into the milk pitcher and steamed it about into oblivion. Then Devin, feeling charitable, well, he stood up and dusted himself off. And he prepared for that girl a most silky and elegant vegan organic fair trade cappuccino. And he presented it to her free of charge. And he asked her, just ever so delicately, he said, "You want to go out with me sometime?" And the girl, she spat back as she walked out the door. "Yeah, go to hell, cue ball." I don't know how we did it, but we fucking did it. We got them. They're ours. We've got 100 billion views. to committing some terrible blunders. I'm guilty as guilty can be. Because today was a day filled with wonderful wonders. Upsettingly, I didn't see. Well, I didn't see vegetables chopping up cleavers, nor pussycats splash in the pool. And I heard there were maple trees chewing on beavers and doggies who ran out of drool. Mr. T, he was knitting a scarf, didn't see it, nor sugar cubes dance in the rain. Plus, I missed the giraffe who was driving a Fiat, and clergymen blowing cocaine. Oh, I could have seen meat served to members of PETA, or vampires getting a tan, or the crippled chameleon who outran a cheetah, or nuclear bombs in Iran. When the homeless got bagged up by bottles, I missed it. Then flowers all ran for the shade. When my grandmother tackled a python and kissed it, the atheists knelt down and prayed. Oh, I could have seen Borneo bonking Bermuda. I could have seen Porky Pig fly. Or I could have seen Jesus play golf with the Buddha, or Earth jumping rope with the sky. But I didn't see nothing, today or forever. These days I just grumble and groan. So consider my warning to you, which is never cement both your eyes to your phone. Holy moly. I got me. It's one of these. It's a, look, it's an emoji. Now, it's natural we, in the age of computers, would crank out some memes and GIFs. So it follows that clever young text message shooters would forfeit their language for glyphs. When we're feeling a feeling which feels kind of happy, well, why not a smiley, we ask? But suppose we're expressing we feel kind of crappy, we'll send them a surgical mask. There's the pondering face if we're feeling confounded, or tongue out if feeling absurd. But the one that I wrote severely thumbs down did, that buck-toothed bespectacled nerd. If our sweeties are pining for something romantic, the sparkling heart would be wise, though it's bolder to offer up something eggplantic, or pussies with hearts in the eyes. Now, emojis can sometimes be really quite vexing. For instance, the oncoming fist. When it's paired with the finger, it's hardly perplexing to guess that the sender is pissed. And I'll likely be lumped with the grumpy old losers. You're welcome to growl and spit, but the one that I'd use for emoji abusers, that smiling pile of shit. That's about enough tech bashing for one. What's that? Anyway, next up, let's hear all about the CEO's new brew. Once upon a happy Friday evening, the entire staff of a startup tech company were taken out for drinks by their boss. He'd chosen a bar at random, which was purported on the internet to cost no more than $2 signs. Immediately upon arrival, the CEO of this startup tech company, well, he politely waved down the bartender in a delightful show of impatience and entitlement. When the first round was ordered, the CEO then proceeded to shove his brand new shiny corporate credit card across the bar, and he felt just a bit slighted when the bartender smugly pointed out the cash only sign. So immediately upon arrival, after his swift return from the ATM, the CEO noticed within the beer cooler a bottle with loopy old German lettering on the label, and it was sealed with one of those fancy rubber doohickeys on a metal hinge. So, wishing to appear cultured in front of his employees, the CEO ordered this remarkable-looking beer, the name of which, unbeknownst to him, translated roughly to something along the lines of Sunday morning hooker snatch. He toasted his fellows on a successful quarter and then took a hearty sip, discovering that This beer tasted strongly of sweaty butt cheeks. So rather than send the beer back, he began to profess loudly to his colleagues just how very good he found this beer to be. And then, at his insistence, they all took a sip of the beer, each techie grimacing at its offensive flavor, yet wishing to placate their overbearing boss while they all smacked their lips and agreed that it was perhaps the best beer they'd ever tasted. 2 weeks later, in a backwoods village in Germany, the brewer of Sunday morning hooker snatch, whilst excitedly waving in the air an order for 6 dozen cases of his beer, postmarked all the way from Sunnyvale, California, he proclaimed to his wife and 7 hungry children that they would be needing a bigger bathtub. Right about now is a little femininity, and lucky for us, here she comes right now. It's time for the tale of Stella and the Frat. Once upon a time, in a rip-roaring party town set by the sea, there lived a stunningly beautiful siren named Stella. And Stella had shimmering sapphire eyes, and she had shapely long legs and soft flimsy skirts, and her armpits she never would shave, though she would shave her head on one side. She lived in a battered and clunky Westphalia van with an old mandolin and an overfed goldfish named Fatty, who was never content with a sprinkle of goldfish flakes, but instead he developed a rather insatiable appetite for human flesh. It so happens that one sweltering April afternoon, Stella had parked her van on the beach, positioned between the frozen margarita stand and the Tiki Torch Emporium, and there she sang out some notes while strumming away on the old mandolin, emitting out over the scene of sunbathers and surf waders the most bewitching and eerie music, loud enough even to drown out the incessant robotic donkey brain coming from the dubstep DJ booth. So right away, a small crowd of funnel-clutching frat boys, while they gathered around Stella, and they were all swaying in their saggy board shorts, and they were grinning, and they were chuckling, and they were flexing their pecs at her. "Hey, boys," Stella sang out of the most tangy rasp in a voice, to which they all replied in unison, "Spring break, bro! Woo!" She beckoned one husky and meaty, shaggy, blonde surf jock into the van and shut the door quickly behind him and looked on in grisly delight as Fatty devoured the boy in a single gulp short and swallowed him. She then poked her head through the window and called out a coy and sinister, "Who's next?" Oh, the bros, they fought like wild dogs to the front of that line, all pushing and shoving, punching and biting each other until the strongest amongst them had elbowed his way right into the jaws of the goldfish before he could even say, "Dude, what the fuck?" And so it went, one after the other, until Fatty was so engorged that he'd shattered his fishbowl and flopped out onto the floor, straining his gills and coughing up puka shell necklaces. Only a single frat boy remained, so Stella tried luring him in with a wink from her eye and a pucker from her lips, but he stood there, frustratingly motionless, just stroking his flawless washboard six-pack, when suddenly there came from the beach full of revelers a giant collective blood-curdling as a tsunami rose way in the distance, and out from the depths of the ocean came the stark silhouette of a horrible, hideous, tentacled sea monster. Stella eyed the frat boy in the midst of this chaos, but he showed not even a single sign of panic. In fact, he just snapped his fingers twice, manifesting out of thin air a heavy and hefty golden trident, all crusty with rubies and pearls, and then with a few clever flicks of his wrist, he used it to cut the roof off the van as if it were merely a can of sardines. And Stella looked on in horror as poor Fatty was gutted alive, releasing the hordes of spring break party bros who all ran for the hills, shrieking like 10-year-old girls, and then he tossed the carcass of the goldfish over his shoulder, and the monster gobbled it up like sashimi. Then the sea fell calm, and the monster retreated back into the deep, and Stella grumbled miserably at the sight of her mangled Westphalia van, until this seafaring demigod of a frat boy, he whistled a shrill, summoning out of the foamy surf a chariot drawn by 2 winged seahorses, which swept Stella and himself off of their feet and into the air and out over the choppy blue waves, and for perhaps the first time in her life, Stella felt kind of weak in the knees. As at last, this mysterious suitor, well, he finally spoke with rugged charisma, and looking her longingly right in the eyes, he requested politely and oh so succinctly that Stella the siren show him her tits. Right about now is a musical interlude. And lucky for us, I just so happen to have a little Broadway number, and it's going out to all the millennials in the crowd. It's called, like, literally annoying. Hit it, boys! Literally, he was dumb as a turkey. Like, literally, he was bred up a mule. Like, literally, oh, what a prick and a jerky. He's a literal shit show, an asshole or two. Like, literally, he was driving me crazy. Like, literally, he was getting my goals. Like, literally, I was Martin Scorsese and literally jumped like right down his throat. Like, literally, he's asleep with the fishes now. Literally, I'm just so full of beans now. Literally, we all about wish to put halves down and know what like literally means. Oh no. Oh God, no! Bloodbath! God! What ruthless warrior am I to cause this crimson flood? Remorseful now I stand and cry above a sea of blood. All slaughterhouses everywhere will crumble down in shame. And Tarantino's kitty fair seems infantile, tame. Chupacabra is drank a sip compared to all this swill. Count Dracula would curl his lip and call it overkill. Was Gettysburg a lousy joke? Were Spartans rarely rough? Felt Caesar but a measly poke? Was Patton just a puff? Until his savageries now moot that tender, gentle Hun. And Genghis Khan would lick my boot to see such horrors done. Perhaps a tiny trickle fell from Christ upon that cross. But none have raised such gruesome hell as I, who's tried to floss. Dental hygiene, it's a bitch. Okay, everybody get those craniums cranking. Because my next piece, well... my next piece, it's a real puzzle. Oh, Daddy, please tell me why Grandpa is dead. Tell me why the embalmers have filled him. Could it be that a coconut fell on his head? Oh, Daddy, please tell me what killed him. Now, son, you can see his old noggin is fine, and your Gramps never went to the tropics. Look, it won't bring him back if we whimper and whine, so let's tackle some happier topics. Oh, Daddy, please tell me why Grandpa has croaked. Why is Grandpa all purple and bloated? I think maybe on crackers and Cheese Whiz he choked and then all of his innards exploded. Now, son, you know well that your gassy old Gramps couldn't tolerate lactose or gluten. Kindly shut up before you give yourself cramps and cut out all your hollers and hooting. Oh, Daddy, please tell me why Grandpa's as stiff as a board and he never will soften. Was it poison or lightning or fall off a cliff? Tell me, How did he get in that coffin? All right, then I'll tell you, dastardly turd. Questions are driving me cuckoo. Look, what did your Gramps in was the shock he endured when he finally solved that Sudoku. Fucking crossword puzzle. Hey, but look, babies, ladies and gentlemen, is what I meant to say. No. What I'm getting at here is that Clyde Always ain't all doom and gloom and death and destruction. How about a love story? Yeah. I just so happen to have a story all about how good a love can be between a man and an inanimate object, and it's entitled The Tale of Drayton and the Catalog. Once upon a time, at the most beautiful strip mall in San Leandro, California, there worked a man named Drayton Drippyburger, and he was a tuxedo salesman. Now, Drayton lived in a studio apartment near to the airport with a cat named Sandy. But one day, a package from corporate headquarters arrived at the boutique, and Drayton eagerly opened it up, only to find therein a whole catalog just bursting with pictures of handsome studs in luxurious suits and ties. And he fell fast in love with each and every last one of them. And he gave them each a name. And at 7 o'clock sharp, 5 nights a week, he'd kiss each one of his strapping bows on the forehead before locking up shop for the night. In the weeks that followed, the customers, well, they began to notice Drayton acting just a little strange. If they wanted a gray with a champagne trim, well, then he'd flip to a picture of a sultry Latino with a 5 o'clock shadow, and he'd say, let's try in what Julio's wearing, except without that scarf. I don't know why he insists on wearing that scarf all the time when I told him how much I hate it. Let's say it was, it was top hats and bow ties that the guest wanted. Well, then he'd flip to the pouty-lipped black man with the perfectly square goatee, and he'd say, oh, check Carl out. Mostly the customers just kind of smiled nervously, but then they began to complain. Then the big bloated boss man, well, he called a meeting with Drayton, and Drayton was fired that day. So he kidnapped the catalog, and he ran out the door, and he locked himself up in his room. And night after night, he danced with them all, with Rick, and with Jimmy, Tyler, and Todd. Poor Sandy the cat went neglected. And she climbed out the window and never came back. And the bills piled up and the rent went unpaid. And then Drayton was out on his ass, and he drank lots of booze, and he slept in the gutter, and he cuddled that catalog dear, until one stormy afternoon, in a drunken rage, he swayed out on the Golden Gate Bridge, and he shouted, "Rah!" And he spat, and he laughed, and he cried. Oh. And then, with a sweep of his arm, Didnt See let those boys fly, and they all fluttered on down to the sea. And then, well, Drayton Drippyburger, he went straight to an AA meeting. A few days after that, he shaved his face clean. A couple of weeks after that, he got his life right back on track when he landed a swell job as a doorman at a fancy hotel downtown where, get this, he gets to wear a luxurious tuxedo every day. And once in a while, you'll see him. He'll be standing out there, getting the door for everybody. And you'll see him, he'll pat this little piece of paper he's got folded up in his pocket, and he'll say, well, it's a little cold today, Julio. Good thing you got your scarf. subject of love stories, allow me to share with you a love story of my very own. All about a love lost years ago. She was my landlady. Oh, in my youth, I used to tramp the coast of California. Mighty fun it was to camp, though a bit of cold, I'll warn ya. So, thus, I sought a room to let, just something warm and cozy, and otherwise would not have met the lovely Lady Rosie. She ran a humble boarding house, the western side of the city. She'd not a family nor a spouse, but loved a cat named Kitty. Her smile flashed this blinding blur. Her eyes were gray and steely. Her curves were round as peaches. Her demeanor touchy-feely. Now, with the weeks they came and went, and always short on money. So Rosie said, in lieu of rent, you work for me now, honey. Well, first I sprayed her gutters out. I did it fast and steady. Then next she had me lay some grout, and boy, my brow was sweaty. I cleaned her carpet, made it gleam. The whole time I was humming. I poured her puss a splash of cream. She found that quite becoming. But then she sent me on my way, abruptly so and shocking. I packed my bag in time to say goodbye and started walking. These days, my youth, it's gone and dead, and money ain't no issue yet. Still, I lay awake in bed and weep into a tissue and reminisce when to my name I never had a penny, and wonder if she does the same, but tenants had she many. Next on the Non Sequitur Network, it's time for another roaring episode of Jittery Jeff, the Celebrity Chef. At the fanciest eatery ever there was, on a Saturday prior to service, while preparing, the staff were all shaken because they had reason to feel very nervous. Entered Jittery Jeff, the Celebrity Chef, who was famously vile and British. He could roar in your ear till he rendered you deaf, but his cooking was really quite shittish. One unfortunate cook over-roasted the lamb, so the chef came up shouting and shoving. Then he seasoned and trussed up that cook like a ham, and he stuffed that poor guy in the oven. When the pastry girl said that she felt underpaid as she idly fingered a booger, came the chef with a torch, and her face he bruleed, but neglected to add any sugar. Then the Sioux, at the busiest part of the night, served a T-bone as tough as a fender. That's when Jeff went berserk on that right piece of shite, and he hammered his testicles tender. Oh, the servers complained in a furious mob that the chef was a mean evildoer. So old Jeff ran him through on a giant kebab with the maitre d' last on the skewer. In the dining room, diners impatient they grew, and so angry their hunger it made them. In response, complimentary liquor he threw before Jittery Joffrey flambéed him. All alone then was Jeff in the barbecue pit, jamming cabbages into the juicer and about to impale his own ass on the spit when there barged in his happy producer. Well, The ratings are up, the producer exclaimed, and I think I'm aware of the reason. All those innocent people you've butchered and maimed? What a triumph! We'll see you next season. Hey, tune into an all-new Jittery Jeff, the Celebrity Chef, this Saturday. Don't touch those dials. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned for more of the Clyde Always show right after this word from our sponsors. Vegetarian bagel shop, vegetarian bagel, vegetarian bagel shop, vegetarian
Enjoy your bagels, everybody, and while you do, allow me to regale you with the yo-yo yarn. I was walking along and I happened to see that a box had been laid on the ground, and with wonders the box was as packed as could be, so my fingers they rooted around. What they pulled from that box was a trinket forgotten. I thought that it couldn't be true, that a fellow could leave such a beauty to rot as a yo-yo, a shimmer in blue. So I picked it on up and I strolled up the block and I fingered the loop on the string, and I slept it, and off went the dog on a walk, and I caught it and gave it a fling, and I flung it and spun it the rest of the week, and I threw it with all of my might, and the people they marveled at Bluey unique till the string got all tangled up tight. Well, I labored to pick it and pull it apart. That knot, it was stubbornly stuck. So I cut it to bits and it busted my heart, and I cursed on my pitiful luck, as my beautiful yo-yo was still as a stone. It was good as a train with no track, and as no one I knew had a string they could loan, I decided to purchase a pack. So I checked all the shops and I searched every store, and I asked any clerk I could find if they happened to carry a packet of 4 and of no in particular kind, but a lot of them frowned and their eyes full of ice, and they told me to go for a hike. So I packed up my bag and I took their advice, and I thumbed down a truck on the pike. And the trucker, he smiled and welcomed me in, and he squawked and he blathered and bawled, and he offered me smokes and a swig of his gin, and he told me the cargo he hauled. He said, "Son, I suppose you can never have guessed what I'm carrying back in the rear. I got nothing but strings, and I swear they're the best, but I've had them for more than a year. And I tried to deliver this load, but ain't nowhere is there a demand. So it's me and these strings, and we're stuck on the road. Say, have you got a yo-yo on hand?" Well, I reached in my pocket and giggled a bit as the truck was picking up speed. I was shaking so hard I was having a fit in my hands. It was sweaty indeed. As I pulled on my yo-yo as quick as a blur, that old Regan, a bump with a punch. Oh no! And it flew out the window! And you can be sure that I heard a most deafening crunch. Oh, say, can you see? Whoa. Well, that's no good, is it? No, I think I think I can do us one better. Let's try Joni Bologna, the queen of the world. Yeah. On a regular street in a regular town, there lived little Joni Bologna, who would wake every day with a groan and a frown to a breakfast of cold macaroni. You see, Joni's old mommy was not very nice. In fact, she was really quite awful, as she'd waste all her time on her mobile device and not make her daughter a waffle. And on Joni's birthday, while walking to school, she cried all alone to her noodles, ignoring the taunts from the bullies so cruel and the rich girls with miniature poodles. In class, Mr. Teacher was mean as a snake. His computer was too, not to mention, when Joni complained of a bad tummy ache, he locked the poor girl in detention. Then, there, Mrs. Principal played with her phone while Joni sat hands neatly folded. And whenever she shifted or muttered a moan between emails, the principal scolded when, suddenly, in through the window there flew on the back of a Pegasus pony George Washington wearing his uniform blue, and he rescued and flew off with Joni. Together they giggled their way through the sky, traversing across every ocean, while snacking on slices of hot apple pie and sipping down silliness potion. Then arrived in the land of the something-namise, where they plugged all the factory smokers. To the children they freed, they gave cherry tart trees and departed, ha-haing like jokers. Returning triumphant, they fell with a crash and were greeted with hoopla and hollers, with presents and gifts and with cards full of cash. It was Joni's face there on the... Oh, I'm sorry. That's face there on the dollars. Then George flew away, and to home Joni shot when she thought that she couldn't feel gladder. Happy birthday, said Mommy. The iron is hot, and I'm nearly done mixing the batter. Thank you, everybody. Anyway, I defy you to find even one professional athlete that would dare to take a knee for that shit. All right? Okay, but now it's time to hear about one of Joni's contemporaries. Oh, he's malicious. He's malevolent. He is Mean Marvin! Once upon a time, there was a little boy with a scruffy ginger top and freckles all over his face, and his name was Marvin Minahan, and Marvin was a meanie. He was a downright vicious bully. He loved to smack the other little boys with skateboards and baseball bats, and the little girls, he'd stab them with pencils. He had a whole closet full of assorted knickknacks and bouncy balls and video games that he'd robbed or lifted from the other kids at school. Marvin was only 10, count him 10 years old, but he was already the most hated person in his whole town, seeing as how he was such a miserable and sadistic little prick. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, maybe this Marvin kid had a bum deal. Maybe he had abusive parents or something. Is that it? Unfortunately, I know this was not the case. See, Marvin's mother was a kind and loving homemaker, and Marvin's other mother was a mild-mannered architect, and even they were horrified of their son, and they'd often curse under their breath. They'd say, honey, it must have been that lousy sperm donor. But I digress. It so happens that one summer day in a sunny corner of a secluded playground, Marvin was burning assorted insect victims under a magnifying glass. Well, he loved to torture all things that he could describe as puny, and most especially those which couldn't easily defend themselves. When, all of a sudden, out of the bushes came another little boy whom Marvin didn't recognize, but he saw right away that this boy was skinny and wispy and weak. So he dropped his magnifying glass, he came running up to the kid, and he grabbed him by the scruff of his neck, and he shouted right in his face, "You better give me whatever you got, you little runt!" Marvin had employed this tactic many times before, and it had always worked perfectly, so you can imagine his surprise when that little boy just stood there, stoic and brave, saying and doing nothing. Marvin raised his fist and growled, "Did you hear me, you fucking shady? You better give me what you got now! I'm gonna knock all your fucking teeth out, and I'm gonna stick it on my pillow tonight!" Still, the little boy stood stood with his shoulders square and his chin held high and did not produce any bubble gum or lunch money. Oh, Marvin roared like a bear, and he stomped his feet and he cracked his knuckles one by one. And that's when the little boy started to hum. And he hummed the most beautiful song. And it started out low and it built and rose to the grandest of crescendos. In fact, it was the most perfect and ingenious musical performance ever delivered here on planet Earth. But the hard heart of Marvin Minahan, it remained unmoved as his fist plowed right through that little boy's face. And then Marvin looked on in horror as the entirety of that little boy's body had disintegrated into a big, massive, menacing cloud of bugs of all shapes and sizes and colors, bugs from all over the world, and they swarmed him and bit him and stung him and creepy crawled all over his face and his neck. And Marvin screamed, and he pleaded, and he begged for help, yet, through all of his desperate sobs and moans, no one came rushing to his aid, not a soul. And then, boom, the bugs flew off in different directions. And Big Bad Marvin, he just sat there hugging his knees and sucking his thumb and weeping and blubbering to nobody at all. The next day, Marvin was late for school. But he arrived just in time for show and tell. And he was dragging behind him 2 gigantic black plastic sacks full of all the toys and the goodies he'd stolen over the years, and he returned them all one by one with a somber and sincere apology. And then Marvin Minahan took a seat and sat with folded hands, and he looked on attentive and polite and pleasant as one of his fellows stepped up to the front of the class for show and tell, and he said, "Hey guys, check it out, these are my Madagascar hissing cockroaches." And that's about when Marvin's underpants went from clean to dirty. Oh no! Oh, not this fucking guy, for real? The guy? Yeah, all right. It's Regan, the militant vegan. You may have met on Hippie Hill a stinker named of Regan, who'd always preach and blather shrill how much he was a vegan. Suppose you'd found a lump of meat, and kindly some extended, would Regan crush it beneath his feet, then lecture on offended? If cherished you a fancy cheese, some gooder, Swiss or bluer, would Regan dash and cheese he'd seize and toss it down the sewer? If had you honey in your tea and dared let Regan know it, as if avenging every bee right in your face, he'd throw it. Now, Regan weren't no hypocrite, professed he on and over, as poplar bark he chewed with grit. And for dessert, a clover. But now, we picnic in the grass and pour our glad libation. Poor Regan's absent, for alas, he's perished of starvation. No, I'm not made of dirt, and you not made of dirt, but I know a guy who smells like a sky, and he's the dirt bag. My jeans are skinny as a stick. My beard's a mile long. My glasses black and plastic thick. My keys sing jangle song. My flannel shirt is buttoned high. My arms are pumped with ink. My neon chucks, they look so fly. My scent, my armpits stink. My diet is devoid of meat. My smokes are rolled by hand. My shoulder bag is really neat. My days are never planned. My fixie bike, it brought me here. My handlebars are bent. My drink of choice is can of beer. My mom, she pays my rent. important question to pose to all of you fine people, and that's, what the hell are we doing here when we could be at a little place I like to call Club Noise?
With all the wristbands, mostly in the dark, save for purple screens and blues, eerie, flashing on tattoos. The music is repetitive. It goes, the sweat, it flows and drips, and all those rockets flows. Who's on this stage on slip, our noses numb. And every lovely one of them was chewing gum and feeling dumb, but never mum. The music is repetitive. The beat goes bum. And every girlie feeling swirly starts to hum. To tenderize her rum, impresses every sort of short and skinny heels like electric eels. Oh, Molly's really nice tonight. He says the guy with a jar of pickles through each earlobe. The music is repetitive. It never stops. The bass just drops and Jim and Jack and Johnny Black, they in the pill, put the goose and out on the loose, and every salty patron does admire. Sapphire, so higher. Music is repetitive. Molly's really nice tonight, he says. The guy with all the wristbands. You said it, dude. She ain't never rude. Says the guy with a jar of pickles through each earlobe. But I hope you might have seen her sexy, sassy, classy chick. She said her name is Tina. The music is repetitive.
I think that's about enough of that for one fucking lifetime. How about you? If you want more of that, you can have it anytime you want at Club Noise in the illustrious Soma district of San Francisco, conveniently located on the corner of Fuck This and This Sucks. Yeah, so fat. Ding. All of that, speaking of which, all that bumping and grinding sure gave me an appetite. So what do you say we stop off for some street meat, as what would any trip to the Mission District be without a hearing of the tale of Manny and the hot dog cart? So once upon a time, not too long ago, here in the Mission District of San Francisco, there lived a man named Manny. And Manny had come all the way from the wilds of the Yucatan to have a go at the American dream. So one day, Manny, with his own two hands, and with some scraps that he found for free, well, he built himself a hot dog cart on wheels. And he bought a big tank of propane and some links and some bacon and buns, not to mention the onions and mustard and hot sauce and tinfoil too. And that very night, Manny, he set up over the corner of 16th and Valencia Streets, and the people, they walked by and they bought his hot dogs. He sold out his whole greasy stock, and he went to bed rich and fat and happy. And the next day, Manny returned, his cart just bursting with supplies, only to find no fewer than 7 other guys, and they were set up on the same goddamn corner, and they were slinging those bacon hot dogs themselves. They'd stolen his brilliant idea. So Manny set up, and he'd sold a few, and he'd started to eat his losses when a cleaning lady, all laden with brooms and mops and buckets and rags, she came up to him and she spoke to him in Mayan, his native tongue. She said, I'm a wicked witch, and I got something down here that could clean up the competition. Well, Manny said, what do you want in return, witch? She said, you'll know that when the time comes, Manny. And Manny agreed. She then handed him a miniature handheld vacuum cleaner and hobbled away. So Manny stood there a minute, this vacuum in hand. Then he crossed to the other side of the street. And he crept up behind a man with a hot dog stand, and he took aim, and he flipped the switch, and believe it or not, he sucked up the whole operation. Man and fire and meat and onions and all. And he did it again, and again and again, and until his was the only stand left. At which point 3 mariachis they walked by, only they weren't singing, they were munching away on pupusas. So Manny marched on down to the pupusery and he sucked up all those tasty pockets. At which point a hipster chick walked by and she was nibbling some slice of pizza pie like a rat on a cracker. So Manny sucked up the whole pizzeria, and most of the building attached, and the water mains burst and sparks flew, and people screamed, ah! And the sirens, they roared to the block. And the police surrounded Manny, clubs aloft, but Manny sucked them up. And he sucked up their cruisers and vans and snarling dogs. Then he sucked up the buildings and wires and poles. Then he sucked up the sidewalks and sewers and streets. Then he sucked up the whole city. Then he sucked up the whole world. Then he sucked up the planets and cosmos and stars. And then Manny, he stood all alone on a field of desolate white, with the vacuum in one hand and his sorry hot dog cart in the other. At which point, a man appeared to Manny. The man was short and tall. The man was fat and skinny. The man was ugly and handsome. The man was black and white and yellow and red and brown. He was an everyman. And he snatched that vacuum out of Manny's hand and he spoke to Manny in Mayan, which, as you know, was Manny's native tongue. He said, what the fuck have you done? Oh, Manny lowered his head and replied, I don't know. The everyman said, I shall have to punish you for this, Manny. And Manny agreed. And the everyman thought for a moment and said, yeah, I got it. I'll send you back to the place of your birth 1,000 years before you were born, and there you can live out the rest of your days. And just like that, Manny awoke as if from a dream. Only he was atop a big pyramid, with his back on a block, and his hands and feet were restrained, and below him were writhing masses, and they were all screaming for his blood. And above him was a familiar face, and she was grinning this vile grin, none other than that of the cleaning lady, wielding not a little feather duster, just a great big razor-sharp shard of obsidian. Meanwhile, the everyman, he pointed the vacuum straight out and he powered it into reverse. And out popped the planets and cosmos and stars, and the earth, it fell right into place. And the city streets lined up all square in a grid. And the people, they hit the ground walking. And at last, the vacuum was sputtered and coughed. And believe me now, folks, I swear, I would never tell you no bullshit story. That night, all across the Mission District, it rained out a torrent of pizza pie slices and pupusas and bacon-wrapped hot dogs. And down the street walked the cleaning lady. And she had Manny's soul buried deep in her pockets. And she snagged one of those hot dogs right out of the air. And she took a big bite. And she snickered. God damn, Manny, these hot dogs kind of suck. Ah, mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue à Californie. Je suis le bouffon de l'accord. Je m'appelle Clyde, toujours enchanté, mes amis, et bonsoir. Je te présente A Tale of Two Roomies. Once upon a time, in a rent-controlled apartment, there lived two roommates named Rob and Bob. Rob was a terrible slob. Bob, on the other hand, was a god-awful, honest-to-goodness, lazy, slovenly sort of a slob. The dishes never ever got washed. The trash never ever got taken out. The dust never ever got dusted. And the vacuum never ever got run, seeing as how it was buried under several layers of dust and trash and dirty dishes. One day, Rob said to Bob that the toilet paper should always, always roll out from the front. Bob insisted back ways was best. Rob then conceded that it didn't really matter, seeing as how they were out of toilet paper anyway. But Bob said it did indeed matter hypothetically, and then he punched poor Rob in the nose. Naturally, Rob's nose started bleeding profusely, but he had no toilet paper to jam up his nostrils. Now, Bob could not have cared less about Rob's bloody nose, so he sat right down on the couch and he turned on the TV. Rob's favorite show was on, so he joined Bob on the couch, but he sat upside down to stop his nose from bleeding. Unfortunately for both of them, Rob was a hemophiliac. 2 weeks later, Bob was charged with the murder of Rob and sentenced to life in prison without parole, but he didn't mind in the slightest, seeing as how his new cellmate was of like opinion when it came to the matter of toilet paper dispensation. Rob and Bob's former landlord has since retired to the coast of Belize, where he lives like a king of kings. The end. Ladies, listen up. Because I've got a cautionary tale for you all about the true, honest-to-God, real-life horrors of internet dating. And it's entitled, The Tinder Date from Hell. Okay. Now, I'll never be sure what possessed me to swipe to the right when I should have known better, as I'm not really into the arrogant type, and his smile looked cheesy as cheddar. Like a fool, I agreed to a time and a place for a date with this obvious winner, and I reasoned aloud as I put on my face, well, at least it'll be a free dinner. So I Ubered across to the far end of town to a dingy and dark taqueria. Standing close by the door was a gal in a gown, and she curtsied and said, "Call me Tia." She escorted me back, and she pulled out my seat while my date was just sitting there smoking, but he offered apologies then for the heat. Lo siento, the AC is broken. As I sat at the table, I'd started to sweat, so I made a fan out of my menu, and I noticed a sinister marionette keeping watch from the wall of this venue. "Have a drink," said my date as he reached for the jug with his eyes nearly red as the vino. "Oh, terrific, sangria," I said with a shrug. I would usually stick with a Pinot. Then there came to the table a man in a vest, our Mesero, who called himself Pablo, whom my date disregarded as one would a pest, when he ordered the shrimp al diablo. While we waited, I sneered at his ratty goatee. It looked harsh as a blackberry thicket, and I scoffed when he pulled out a skeleton key, which he scratched on a lottery ticket. "Oh, for Christ's sakes, I'm leaving," I spat in a huff as I reached for my purse and my jacket, but he lunged and he snatched me and handled me rough. So I screamed of a deafening racket, but Miss Tia and Pablo did not run to help. They just stood by the door at the ready. And the marionette came alive with a yelp. It was dancing and flinging confetti. "Please, don't go," begged my date with a hideous hiss as his skin went from scaly to thorny. He was flicking his tongue as he went for a kiss. See my date, he was actually horny. And that brings us to our penultimate piece of the evening, and in the spirit of tenacity, I know this has been a long haul, so thanks for sticking with me. We're almost through it. In the spirit of tenacity, it's appropriately titled, Clyde Always Finishes What He Starts. One evening, barely midnight maybe, wifey asked with eyes alit, I wonder, could you, baby, eat my pussy for a bit? So chivalrous did I agree and smile warmly with my eyes while coaxing moans out with my free hand, pressed my face between her thighs. She blossomed open like a lotus, squirming madly where she lay as nibbling eye was scant to notice night had blossomed into day. Don't stop, she called, her breathing buckling. Yes, I answered, bowing meek, though sore my jaw I kept on suckling, never stopping all that week. I'm almost there, she kept insisting, bringing me about to tears, as down I bend, my tongue a-twisting, better part of 20 years? Now, never doubt a man's persistence. Dying there upon that bed, I promised her I'd go the distance. I'd become the munching dead. They buried us with service fleeting, causing but a meager fuss. While underground, her was I eating, little worms were eating us. Then eons passed, our bones were lusty, skull to pelvis, just the same. When flew a puff of something dusty, finally, she fucking came! But I've got just a slight dedication to make before I present it, and namely, I'd like to dedicate it to all of you, the artists of the Paris of the West. I mean the musicians and the poets and the comedians. And I mean the rappers and the DJs and the dancers, and the photographers and the painters and the sculptors and the cartoonists, and the chefs and the bartenders and the activists and the castle builders and the dreamers. To anyone who's ever, hold on. To anyone who's ever sang in the shower, or doodled some shit in sidewalk chalk, or crocheted their son a scarf. We do it. Why do we do it? We do it because we can't not do it. We do it because the muse is never satisfied. And we do it because we've all got something to say to the world, and it's all divine, and we're all divine, and this one's for us. It is the origin of the God. Once upon a time, in a wicked city just like this one, there lived a disgusting bum named Jimbo. And Jimbo, he had tangled, dirty blonde hair, and his face, it was swollen up and purple, seeing as how he drank 1.5 gallons of rot gut moonshine a day, which he purchased in Chinatown for $0.25 a pint. Jimbo was so articulate, but he was also very horny. He'd regale any woman he saw with the finest poetics he could muster, but always to no avail, seeing as how he smelled like the city dump. But one day, while he was shooting up in the bathroom of a corporate coffee house downtown, a goat man appeared to him in the bathroom mirror, and the goat man said, "So says the fawn behind the glass. If sex you seek to gain, go grab a rag and wash your ass, and comb that gnarled mane. When next you meet a Rosie, lass, she'll know you as James Vane. Then poof, the goat man disappeared. And James did as he said and walked out of that bathroom door, disgusting bum, no longer and never ever again. From that point ever after, he knew deep in his heart that he was, in fact, the most handsome poet who had ever lived. He spent the rest of that afternoon spouting verse up to the rooftops until he came upon a dimly lit and deserted bar where the bartender was fast asleep and snoring loudly. So James walked in and he helped himself to a stiff drink. And he noticed against the far wall of the pool room a cabinet secured heavily with clunky locks and with chains. And from within this cabinet came the sound of a gentle knocking. That sounded to James Vane like a plea for help. So cleverly, he picked the locks all with one hand while he snacked on cocktail olives with the other. And then he fell to his knees as the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. She stepped out of the cabinet and looked down into his eyes, and she was beaming sun spray out of the back of her head, which James noticed was beautifully adorned with none other than it was the pelt and the ears of a fox! She yanked his hair viciously, but spoke softly as a butterfly as she said, I've been waiting and waiting for you, my darling. And the words flowed freely from his poet's heart as he replied, I want to fuck you. At which point, she snapped her fingers twice, dissolving the flimsy floor of her dress and revealing a tuft of solid gold pubic hairs and a couple of daisies where her nipples ought to have been. And then right there on the pool table for 5 solid hours, they engaged in every insidious sex act ever invented, and they created a few new ones of their own as well, and they recorded all of it in a tiny leather-bound moleskin journal, and they fell fast asleep in each other's arms, and they were awakened a couple of hours later by a man with a clipboard who shook them hard saying, go on, get your fucking asses up. They looked around and found the bar packed shoulder to shoulder with beards and beanies and skinny jeans and neck tattoos. The man, he indicated a stage in the front of the room that was spotlit and set, and he shouted frantically, let's go, come on, it's time for your set, let's go. You'll need 5 minutes of that, hurry, 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 hurry. So they, in a sort of daze, they walked buck naked, hand in hand, to the microphone, and they stared out into the eager eyes of the audience seated before them and knowing not what else to do. They raised the leather-bound journal between them and cracked it open, and bang, the goat man! He burst through the swinging doors, bringing hurricane winds behind him. And he pressed a silver fiddle to his beard, and he soon sawed a blast of fanfare, shattering every piece of glass in the bar, and then some. So James Vane and the foxy lass began to read, as the Fawn's harmonies wrapped them in a blanket of bliss, and they all 3 of them rose from the stage and smashed through the ceiling of the bar and continued to rise ever upward. The crowd, they sat dumb fucking founded in a moonlit puddle of their own tears. As the MC of the local open mic night tapped his clipboard thrice and called skyward, wait! Like, who are you guys? And James Vane, almost to the brink of the heavens, Didnt See reply in an echoing sonic boom, fuck you! We are the gods!
I want to thank you guys all for what you do that's creative because it inspires me. And I want to thanks again. But I've got a listy here of people I got to thank because I want to thank them, you know. But number one, Miss Stephanie, the owner of this.
Miss Stephanie!
Thank you for having me. I wouldn't be here. Number two, Miss Madison, for giving me that swell. That was you, right, Madison? Who gave me the introduction? Next, I gotta thank Hector, who's the head. He's the head honcho when it comes to all the lights and the poles and the pipes and shit like this. So thank you, Hector, wherever you are. Next, I have to thank Lauren, who's a kind of a production manager here, and she really helped me out as I organized the show. So thank you. I gotta thank Sharon Eberhardt because she was the one to whom I sent the email, and if she didn't say, yeah, sure, what the hell, then I wouldn't have done this. Next, I gotta thank my mentor, Stephen Coppell.
Stephen Coppell!
Fostered my poetic prowess, and on top of that, he's encouraged my every insane inclination over these past 4 years. So thank you for that, Stephen. It's going to get real sappy for a second. I got to thank my beautiful, wonderful, loving, darling girlfriend, Brittany. Brittany. Me and all my props all over the goddamn place, and she helped me make my stickers. So buy some fucking stickers. And she helped me make my website. So go to ClydeAlways.com if you want to check me out. Thank you, baby. I love you, and you support me in ways. And I got one more great big thank you. And I hope he comes out because it's for the man in that booth. Eric!